Hey everyone, Ilana here, still don't have a voice. I wanted to shout out an amazing event that's happening in Toronto called Jewish Futures, an arts and culture salon before we get into today's episode. It is an incredible event that I had the pleasure of going to last year. I moderated one of the panels, and this year our producer Michael Fraiman is also going to be on one of the panels, which I believe is a pitch session. It's happening Sunday, November 24th at the Fraiman JCC and Toronto Holocaust Museum from 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. If you are someone who works in the arts and is Jewish, whether you're in Toronto or you're nearby and you want to come in, it was such an amazing opportunity to network with other people that work in my own industry, but also other industries. I met lots of different people who are singers and painters and Jewish administration arts workers. And the panels were incredibly inspiring last year. I'm sure that the panels this year will be the same. It's a time to reflect on what the future of Jewish art looks like. So again, check that out, November 24th at the Fraiman JCC. We'll put a link in the show notes for sign up.
We would do this thing where I'd say, what is this? It's a tish, how do you say hello? Shalom Aleichem. I never got conversational, but it left me with a seed of interest in Yiddish.
Hello, bonjour, shalom, and welcome to Culturally Jewish. I'm David Sklar.
And I'm Ilana Zackon.
On this week's episode, we chat with singer-songwriter Joseph Landau of the Toronto-based Yiddish swing and folk band Yosl and the Yingels.
Mama always wanted me to be a doctor, but I became an artist and that really shocked her. Now I'm interviewing people in the biz, pros and newish, but all of them are artists and they're culturally Jewish.
Ilana, how you doing this week?
Well, I just wanted to make it clear for our listeners that I don't have a sore throat for the entire month. We are recording this 2 days after the live event, just so you're aware. So my voice is still not here,
right?
But it's not been going on for 2 weeks.
I listened to the episode last night and I did pick up on something. I thought, Ilana's just fighting off a little scratch or a cold or a cough or something like that.
Yeah, I called my husband on my way home and he's like, you just sound like a different person. like just someone with a gravelly, raspy voice.
Someone who's been smoking cigarettes for 50 years of their life.
Yeah, there you go.
Besides feeling a little under the weather, what's new and exciting in your life?
Well, it was very fun to come into Toronto, minus my throat. We had a nice, intimate audience who were very interested in the radio play and asked some great questions. Some of them came to chat with us afterwards. It was nice being in that space. The last time that I was there was for Jewish Futures, which we'll talk about in the listings. But yeah, I really enjoy the live moderation. It's really fun. You really feed off the audience members' energy. And I had fun interviewing Michael.
Of course.
That's never happened before.
No, he's always in the background lurking, but he's a very eloquent speaker.
Lurking, yeah.
And what else?
Yeah, so that was fun.
And you were at the Azrieli Music Awards too?
Yeah, that was before I got sick, so that was good. It's my first time actually going to a professional orchestra, in an orchestral space. I'm sure there's a word for this, and any music lover is going to shun me, but I don't know. Do you know the word for those fancy rooms that are set up specifically for orchestras? There must be a word for it.
Pit?
No. The whole space, in movies where it's about orchestra conductors and it's really fancy with the way that the whole room is set up specifically for that. It was in the Place des Arts building in Montreal, but it was specifically their orchestra room.
Okay. No, anyway, I don't know the name.
It was really cool because I'd watched this movie with Cate Blanchett a few months ago called Tar, where she plays an orchestra conductor. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. I feel like I'm in that.
Okay.
And the music was a lot more experimental than I expected. It's a Jewish music award. So two of out of the, I think it was 3 composers were Israeli. And I was expecting typical Jewish orchestral music, but not at all. There was a live choir, quite big. And then only a few instruments. And it was really eerie music, playing a lot with breath and sounds made by the singer's mouths on top of all these different instruments. It was it was a lot more avant-garde than I expected, which was interesting because there's a part of me that felt I want melody. I just want melody. When is the next one going to have more melody? But then it obviously, I don't know, maybe that was the point. Like they kind of like stretched. Some of them were based off Jewish psalms. I don't know. It was interesting. Not what I expected.
Interesting. Well, speaking of music, today on our podcast, we have Joseph Landau of the Toronto-based Yiddish swing and folk band Yosl and the Yingels. And for those who don't know, Yosl and the Yingels are a Yiddish swing and folk band who fuse together classic Jewish European folk songs with Yiddish big band and theater music. And as we'll get into it, Joseph formed this band in the summer of 2021, sort of as a pandemic busking project. The band is set to release their debut EP of original Yiddish songs, Zackon, on November 15th. Let's take a listen.
Ich hub dir sind an Punem in a vermischten Sternbild in Avion die Levune Sternen in Gedild nicht kein Einsach in der herrlichen Nacht und außer so Schambild als wenn ich ob dich der sein in dem Aeroplane in a vermischten Sternbild ich hub dein
In Berlin, rumors are spreading.
Holocaust victims, their bodies are just dug up.
It's a shunda.
But the truth is even more unnerving.
Was your family in the Shoah?
Dude looks like he was in the Shoah.
As the world panics,
This is some ritual, bringing the dead back to life.
No. You said this wasn't illegal.
It isn't, I don't think.
one woman seeks the truth.
These are questions you can't answer.
And you're too afraid to even ask them.
Justice, a Holocaust zombie story. An original audio drama from the CJN in association with the Ashkenaz Foundation. Listen now at thecjn.ca/zombies or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Joseph, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How are you both?
Good. So I want to talk a bit about klezmer music. I went to Klez Canada this past summer, and that was a nice immersion into the world of klez. How did you get into it? Is it something that you grew up on, or did you discover it later in life?
How did I get into klezmer music? My grandfather was a klezmer musician. He was a drummer. However, I didn't get so into klezmer music, and I still wouldn't really consider myself into it. So you went to Klez Canada this year.
Yeah.
I actually went for my first time last year.
Oh, well, we missed
I was
each
also,
other.
Yeah, I know. I was also in the scholarship program.
Yeah.
And it was also a little bit of, how can I say it? Like I had to learn a lot about klezmer music.
Okay.
So really what I focus on is more Yiddish songs, which have a lot of crossover into the klezmer world, but there's some differences as well.
And what about speaking Yiddish? Did you grow up speaking Yiddish, or did you learn that also later in life?
Later in life, certainly. This was another one. So I mentioned my grandfather was a klezmer musician. I was very close with him. My father passed away when I was 18. And after that, I started to spend a lot of time with my grandfather. And one of the things that we did is I asked him to teach me Yiddish. Now, he didn't really, but we would do this thing where I'd say, oh, what is this? It's a tish, how do you say hello? Shalom Aleichem. So we'd go through kind of a random, me asking very specific things about how to say them in Yiddish, and he would tell me. And I never got conversational or anything like that, but it left me with a seed of interest in Yiddish that I really developed over the next, maybe about 5 years later, I started to become interested and actually self-study.
This sounds like a much better way to get into the language of Yiddish, as opposed to someone like me who was in Bialik High School in Montreal and learned it from sitting down in a chair. And the focus was always maybe on, verbs and tenses, right? And it never really absorbed into me. It almost sounds like this is a better experience to actually appreciate and learn a language is with someone who is native to it, with someone who has maybe a familiar relationship to you. How did you sort of take it on, and what did you absorb beyond just the words and the tenses?
Well, I don't really know my tenses very well. I would have a hard time talking about the grammar of Yiddish. I just started going on WhatsApp and joining Yiddish WhatsApp groups, and I learned it little by little that way. And then when I had my first, my only child, with more to come, halavai, I started to speak with him in Yiddish, and so slowly in that way, I've started to, I guess, expand my vocabulary.
And so are you fluent now?
Yeah, I'm pretty fluent in
Okay.
Yiddish.
Because I know that you record, you sing in a lot of different languages like German and Italian. When did you actually start writing original music in Yiddish, and what was that like? Was that challenging?
Yeah, it was challenging. It was a funny way that I started. During the pandemic, I was busking in sort of the Polish neighborhood of Toronto, and a Polish woman stopped as she heard me, and I was playing a song that was a Polish Yiddish song, and she knew the Polish version of it. And it's a long story, but she asked me if I would come and perform a few concerts with her band, which I did. And in one of the songs, she had, one of the concerts, she had a song that she had put Polish words over. It was an instrumental song that she called Jewish Polka. And she said, "Oh, is it okay? Would I be interested in writing a verse for it in Jewish?" So I did. And then I thought, that wasn't so hard. And then I thought it could be an interesting thing to try to write an EP. And just like that, the idea for writing an EP of original Yiddish songs was born.
And then from there, what happened next? You sort of took off. Is that when you had your band Yosl and the Yingels?
Yeah, this was also a sort of like a pandemic project. Just way to get everyone together to busk and to hang out and to explore a little bit more this type of music. And but no, the band was originally dedicated to covers. And when we say band is maybe a little bit misleading. It's really me, and then I have different musicians who I work with. So there are some who work with me more often than others.
Some that come in and then go out, and it's on rotation basis, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's right.
And how would you describe the sound of Yosl and the Yingels compared to, let's say, other? You said you didn't want to use the word klezmer, so I won't use it. But to me, it sounds like klezmer music, but Yiddish.
Yeah,
Yiddish
we use a lot of klezmer. I'll talk a little bit about the difference. When we're talking about klezmer music, we're usually talking about that instrumental, more wedding music. Once we start having lyrics and stuff like that getting thrown in, it tends to change the forms of the songs. And a lot of our music shares a little bit more in common with maybe traditional jazz than it does with klezmer. However, some of the harmonic ideas and melodic ideas will be closely related to themes that you'll hear in klezmer music.
So I want to talk a bit about the fact that you are singing what you call secular Yiddish music. As I learned this summer at Klez Canada, klezmer music, Yiddish music, seems to cross through a lot of communities, whether Jewish or non-Jewish, and also many different generations. There are those who are native Yiddish speakers, and they grew up on this kind of music, and then there's a new generation of people who are absorbing it now. What are your audience demographics like when you've played with your band, and do you have a target audience in mind for your music?
My audience has tended to be those very interested in Yiddish, and usually older. So
interesting.
I do a lot of seniors' homes. I do like Russian senior community centers. When we've done special concerts, it's been filled with tends to be over 60 crowd. I don't know if I would say that's my target audience, but I'll go where the interest brings me.
What is your hope and aspiration? Like, are you trying to bring this music to a new generation? Is that your ultimate goal?
Definitely. I mean, I was performing 2 days ago in like a hip Toronto bar playing this type of music. I saw someone made a post. They didn't know who the band was, but they said accordionists and bassists play Eastern European music. Very cool.
There you go.
was the list. So there is a burgeoning world music scene in Toronto that's doing better and better all the time. I think that there is a future for our music to reach into that world as well. However, Yiddish is a specific thing also. If you can't understand the language, I wonder if it's also a little limiting.
That's really interesting because I live in Montreal, and there's a cafe really close to where I live called Café Le Dépanneur, and every Monday there's a klezmer band that plays, and it's just everyone from Klez Canada lumped together. And
I know
and the
community
people
that does it.
Love it. There are a lot of young people who come every week, and also older people. That's really interesting. I don't know if that's just. I mean, Toronto does have like the most Jews in Canada. And
So,
I
Ilana,
wonder
the
if
people
that,
who are coming,
yeah.
are they Jews or non-Jews who are coming to these events in Montreal?
I mean, so just as like an asterisk on Cafe Lit Up in Ur, which I also perform at, by the way, it's a coffee shop. So anyone who happens to be at the coffee shop that day is going to get whatever musician happens to be performing at that time. However, this group, which like on the schedule they call Zaffer and Friends because the head of the band, his name is Zaffer. But Zaffer is not Jewish, and he has a whole interesting story, which I don't remember all the details of about how he fell into this music. But a lot of the other members of the rotating band are, and they've been doing this slot for quite a while. So a lot of Klez Canada people come, who in Montreal, mostly Jewish. But then, I don't know, you get people from like the Milan Chavura, older people, younger people, and then random people who happen to just be at the coffee shop. So it's kind of hard to say. It's not like they're buying a ticket to go to a show, but to me, and maybe it's because Klez Canada is based in Montreal, though you do have Ashkenaz Fest in Toronto, which I also went to this year, and, it was quite demographically diverse, and a lot of non-Jews also. So what do you think is that next step to kind of attract that wider audience?
Well, the next step is definitely getting my CD out. So that's
your debut album. I just want to, it comes out November 15th.
November 15th.
It's called Zikrones. Can you tell us what that means, and then maybe what inspired you to create it in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely. It means memories. I had the idea to create classic themes in Yiddish songs and then update them for the modern world. So, for instance, I have a song in there called Mein Heimstädtele, my hometown, and it's based off a Yiddish song called Mein Städtele Bells.
Beim Tischfrei gehen wir alle singen, ba-da-da-da-dam-dam-dam. Fußbuben mehr gegessen dämmels, ba-da-da-da-dam-dam-dam. Jene ich gedenk mir wie in Chulem, Jesus jo geschehen. Wenn ich der Mann mich jener Joren, nur der Tag von Glied gesehen. Kleiner Weiberlach, kleiner Heimerlach, auf die Gässer lach. Maar versteht Allah, a kleiner Welterlach, mit kleiner Kinderlach, wie Mul hab ich dort gelebt.
And this is in the original song that it's based on. They're looking back at the old shtetl and wondering, what is still there. In my version, I'm looking back at my hometown of Thornhill, which I guess you've probably heard of before.
Yeah, I lived there when I was a baby.
Beautiful. So that's like the big Jewish suburb of Toronto is Thornhill, Ontario. So I'm just describing it and wondering if my memories of it are accurate. So all the songs sort of have this type of theme on the album.
I just want to circle back to how do we overcome that issue of getting to the younger demographics. I mean, even within the Jewish community, talking about what you just mentioned, a song about Thornhill. I mean, there's tons of young people who grew up in Thornhill and continue to be growing up in Thornhill. So how do you reach those people?
That's an interesting question. I think with my type of music, the way that I reach those people has more to do with an interest in Yiddish. So we have this huge resurgence of Yiddish right now, and I think as that reaches more of a younger generation, more people will come to my music or other modern Yiddish singers, a lot of them whom are coming out of New York right now.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Also, a lot in Massachusetts, randomly. That's what I learned this summer.
Oh, yeah, Massachusetts has
well, they have the Yiddish Book Center there. There's a huge Yiddish scene.
Yeah, I believe Das Yiddische Call, like the big Yiddish podcast, comes out of Massachusetts as well.
As we're talking, everybody, it makes me think back to when I was in school. We would say, and we were forced to study Yiddish. If we didn't say we would say, if it's not a dying language, it's a dead language, right? Nobody of our generation speaks it. Nobody is interested in it. And yet, at the same time, I'm hearing that there is such a revitalization of Yiddish culture, Yiddish language, Yiddishkeit, basically. Joseph, what do you think it is that people want to reconnect with their past, with their grandparents' generation, with their great-grandparents' generation, with Eastern Europe? What is it that maybe the younger generation is missing or wants to reconnect with, and dive back into everything about the Yiddish language and Yiddish music?
I think there's a few different things that are coming together. There's a leftist version of a resurgence of Yiddish, which has a lot to do with disconnecting from Israel and finding a different type of Yiddishkeit that they can connect to. There's also a much more frim, like a Hasidish based Yiddish that's popping up right now, and that has a lot to do with reconnecting to the old rebbes, the speeches. Specifically in Chabad, you'll see a lot of young people that are not speaking Yiddish are becoming interested in Yiddish again, and I think there's a few things, but it's also with an exploding of Yiddish culture in the religious world as well. So I think both these things are coming together at once.
Do you think then there's going to be a bit of a clash between a generation where the institutions of the Jewish community in Canada, there might be a bit of a tete-a-tete in a sense of you got this young, burgeoning leftist community that wants to disassociate itself from the state of Israel, and the institutions of the Jewish community that are sort of saying, no, Israel is an essential part of who we are as the Jewish diaspora?
I think that the answer is definitely yes. Ilana, you probably know best.
I was going to say
Canada
yes,
this
David.
Year. How was it?
Oh my gosh.
There must have been a lot of issues because there were some last year.
There was a lot of tension, to put it lightly. And definitely that is a big, I think that is going to become more of a prevalent issue. It is niche. Like, it's not like the majority of Jews fit into the leftist anti-Zionist category, statistically speaking, anyway. But definitely in a place like Klez Canada, at the time that we find ourselves in, it was definitely a majority there. But, that was like 300 people. I actually wanted to talk a bit about a concept I learned at Klez Canada this year called Yiddishland. I don't know if you've heard this term before, Joseph, but basically it's a term to describe a space that doesn't actually exist physically, but that's a metaphorical space for Yiddish culture to be celebrated and explored. And something like Klez Canada or even your concert would be an example of like creating this atmosphere where suddenly we are, bringing this culture to life, even though there is no shtetl. We don't live in that time anymore. It's not the first language that people are being brought up with unless, they're in the Hasidic world or their parents, decided to make it their first language. So how does that concept resonate with you? And where do you situate your music with your band within that world?
How do I feel about it? I think it's a beautiful idea of describing how we try to create an environment that doesn't really exist anymore, but it has some value to us that we'd like to bring back. So I do this. I was like searching out other Yiddish-speaking parents in the neighborhood. After a long and arduous search, I found one. And now we have coffee dates where we'll bring our babies and we'll speak to them in Yiddish. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that. But yeah, there's not a lot of Yiddish speakers in my life. My rabbi speaks Yiddish. A couple older people in my synagogue, and a couple friends, and that's it.
So we did touch on this very briefly before, but your debut album, Zichrones, can you just tell us a bit more about it? You mentioned there's a song about shtetl. What other kind of themes do you explore in the music? And can you tell us a bit about some of the musical styles that you're using on the album?
When I talk about going back to the classic songs of the Yiddish world, I both mean in terms of the musical form as well as the lyrical topics. So I have like a waltz that's a little bit like Tum Balalaike. Mm-hmm. I have a Yiddish jazz, like a traditional kind of Barry Sisters style Yiddish swing tune. The topics are going back to my hometown in mein Heimstädtele. Also have in Lome Freilich sein is one. It's like the classic son talking to his mother, and the mother uses the power of a Jewish mother's guilt to make him be a better Jew. And it's like a conversation between the two.
Mein lieber Hitten sollst du sich, der Nacht ist sei neppeldick, in Fahrgäst nicht dein warme West, dann sorgen will ich nicht. Na dir deine Stiefel her, trägst die Linde, Riemen sterf in Avos-Zeit, der aufgeschleppt, also die hast gelebt. Dabarei, 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 dabarei,
Before we wrap up, I was wondering, because I'm getting really into klezmer since the summer, if you can share some of your favorite klezmer or Yiddish bands that you're loving right now.
Oh, that's one of those questions where it's how do we choose? I've been listening to a lot of...
What are you listening to like this week?
Seymour Rechseit, who's like a classic singer, Yiddish singer. And he did some really interesting covers. I've also been listening to a guy named Dave Cash. And he was another guy who translated a lot of English songs into Yiddish. So he did like Vus wird sein, which is Que sera, sera. So he has all these like really fun Yiddish.
Someone sang that this summer.
Yeah. So he has a lot of them. Sefallen de Blätter is his version of Autumn Leaves. It's like kind of classic jazz tunes that he turned into Yiddish. And I'm a big fan of his.
Wonderful. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for coming on today to chat with us about Yosl and the Yingels, and all the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to speak with both of you.
Geit a Zieg, a Chin in Zerig, sich sie zu essen, a Batam Greens, gefind sie a Blim, de hingrige Zieg, ein kleiner Blimala, schein wiedersehen. Blimala, Blimala, Reisala, kennst die a Meisala, der Zeilen mir, bis mir da fahre Geschäften reisen.
So, David, what is going on in Canadian Jewish arts?
All right, so at the Miles Nadal JCC, we have something called Self-Portrait Mastery. And this is an event inspired by the work of French surrealist and avant-garde artists Claude Cahun and Marcel Moore. Professional photographer Barb Simkov will be leading this Trans Awareness Week of self-portrait workshops. Participants will learn about Cahun and Moore's Jewish lesbian life partnership in the French Resistance during the Second World War, and then how to craft their own narrative through photography. There's no advanced experience required. They just ask that you bring a cell phone with camera to participate in the hands-on portion of the workshop.
At the Prosterman JCC, where we held our live recording, on November 20th, there's an Israeli film series screening of the film Checkout. It's a fast-paced mystery featuring a terrific Israeli cast. It's about Dov, a Jewish-American spy in Istanbul, desperate to convince his Israeli peers that he has located a legendary terrorist. It's a fast-paced mystery, so be sure to check that out November 20th at the Prosterman JCC.
And here in Calgary, from November 2nd to the 17th, is the official Calgary Jewish Film Festival. One of the films that are going to be offering free of charge is the very powerful documentary We Will Dance Again, about the tragic events that unfolded on October 7th at the Nova Music Festival in Israel. You also will have a sneak preview of the Israeli movie Chalisa, which was nominated for 5 Israeli Academy Awards this year, including Best Film, Best Actress, and Best Supporting Actress too. For more information about all the movies being screened, and I planned on attending next week for a twofer. They have this big event for people who are Jewish and 40 under. For more information about all the movies being screened at the Calgary Jewish Film Festival, just head to bethtzedek.ca or type on Google Calgary Jewish Film Festival.
The Harold Green Jewish Theatre in Toronto is putting on a legacy tribute to Leonard Cohen and Carole King called Cohen and King. It's happening on November 21st in Midtown Toronto at the George Weston Recital Hall in the Meridian Arts Center. It's going to be a concert showcasing the music of these 2 prolific Jewish composers, starring an ensemble of Canadian musical theater stars with a live band. Sounds great. Well, it looks like there's a lot going on, so keep
on keeping on? What's that?
Keep on keeping on. I don't know where I was going with that. My brain is like not quite functioning.
You need some rest.
I just got in from Toronto last night and my throat hurts.
Ilana, what do you do as a voice actor?
I'm a mess.
Ilana, what is your like natural go-to remedy to repair your voice?
Yeah. So a lot of herbal tea, ginger, honey, a lot of rest, water. I got chicken soup on my way home yesterday.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, a lot of it is rest, like vocal rest, which is not what I'm doing right now, but I will do after we get off this podcast recording. But trying to just keep my voice, let it come back to life with lots of liquids. But I do, I've had experiences where I've had a gig. This is pre-COVID. I feel like no one would do this now. Mm-hmm. But I felt like I was going to die. And they wanted to bring me in to fix like a line on an ad that I had done. Or not to fix. I think they were like redoing the ad, but wanted to change like one line to make it relevant to whatever new season was coming out or something. And I remember like being in the car and I was sweating and I felt disgusting. But I like warmed up my voice enough that it like didn't show, and luckily it ended up being like a word, and I was like, thank freaking God. But I remember leaving the studio and I didn't want to touch anyone because I didn't tell them I was sick. I was like trying so hard to look normal, and the producer like leaned over to like give me a hug, and I was like, oh God.
I just got you sick.
Was, like, trying so hard to like not do it, and I thought that I came across as like a diva because I was like, oh, she probably thought I didn't want to give her a hug.
I don't hug people.
Yeah, so all to say, like, even with like the live event, I was like, oh God, I have no voice. But you know, it's like the performer in you. You're like, the show must go on.
Indeed. My thing is oil of oregano. I don't know if you've ever tried that.
Oh yes, I used to use that. Maybe I should pick some up. I used to use that when I lived in Vancouver, and it's so gross, but it works.
Rest well, be well, take all the liquids you can, and hopefully your voice will come back for next time.
Oh my God. Yeah, I really hope so. That will be in like a month from now, David.
Culturally Jewish is hosted by me, David Sklar, and
Ilana Zackon.
We're produced and edited by Michael Fraiman, and our theme music is by Sarah Siegel-Lazar. We're a member of the CJN Podcast Network. To support our work and everything the CJN does, visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a monthly donation and receive a charitable tax receipt.
Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.